Hi, everyone, and welcome back to that UFO podcast. My name is Andy, and joining me on today's show, I have first off a returning guest. He has a background in aerospace engineering and is a renowned researcher in his own right, Ryan S.Wood. And also, for his first appearance on the podcast, he is a humanities professor and UFO researcher. I'd love to welcome Anthony DeLorenzo. Welcome to both of you.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad we're here.
Yeah,
We do
thanks,
that
Andy.
awkward thing where you both talk because I usually have one guest on at a time, and I just throw it out there because we're all going to speak over each other at points. But Ryan, you've been on the podcast before, but for those unfamiliar with you or your work, what's your kind of elevator 60-second pitch of who you are and what you do?
Yeah. I guess I've specialized in sort of two things, government documents and UFO crashes, and have written a couple of seminal books around that and sort of the leading expert championing the majestic documents and all their authenticity. Um, and so that's my play into ufology, along with my recently deceased father, who got me into this entire field back when I was like 14 or 15, as I can't remember.
And we'll come back to talk about your late father in just a moment. And very quickly before Anthony comes in, if anyone hears I'm a little bit bunged up, I do have a bit of a cold, so the guests, Anthony and Ryan, are going to keep this show going tonight for me. And Anthony, on that, a little bit about your own background and what got you into the UFO topic.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm a humanities professor, and I've been researching the UFO subject more intensely for the last few years, which is what led me to reaching out to Ryan as part of my research to talk to him. And I got to interview Ryan, and then we talked, and we started working on the UFOs Who Knows book. So yeah, I have a history background, and that's kind of how I approached the UFO topic. I've tried to kind of be as objective as I can. There's obviously a very large literature and history of the subject,
Hmm.
and so that's basically me in a nutshell.
And you get a slightly more extensive background check because obviously Ryan's been on the podcast before. And if anyone wants to hear more about Ryan, they can check out that early interview. But for you, Anthony, did you have any early interest in the UFO topic? Were you a bit of a UFO geek growing up, as some of us were? Was it something you came into later in life? What's that journey been like for you?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting for me because I never was into UFOs, flying saucers, or like space. I never watched Star Trek or Star Wars actually, so it just happened to be that way for me. But I've always had a really open mind. I've always been kind of someone who has searched for kind of hidden truths of reality and all of that. But it's just funny, the UFO subject never really was on my radar. I was kind of into other government cover-ups for a while, and things like more about like consciousness and stuff. And then I really only like maybe 4 years ago was realizing how serious it was being taken at a government level. And then I just went down the whole rabbit hole.
Have you ever had your own sighting before or anything like that?
Actually, yeah, it's kind of funny. I've actually had like 4 sightings at this point.
Do you want to touch on those quickly?
Yeah, I'll try to be really quick. I mean, one, I was just on the top of a mountain hiking near where I live in broad daylight, and I just saw like a like stereotypical like a disc flying object at like a medium altitude, and it was just literally like 2-3 seconds, and then it just vanished in midair. And I mean, yeah, I saw it. My wife didn't believe me, but someone else was up on the mountain with me, and we talked about it. And then, yeah, I've seen a couple other on actually with camping trips with some of my colleagues. Uh, we saw one out in the Adirondack Mountains of New York, and this one was more at like dusk, and
Hmm.
it was one of those glowing orbs, and it came from far away in the horizon, and we all saw it. There was 4 of us. The other 3 guys very skeptical, but we all to this day attest to it. And this glowing orb came, and it hovered right over the valley we were looking down at, and it probably hovered for maybe 10 minutes, and we had no idea what it was. And the same thing, it just vanished in midair. And then the other sightings, real quick, are right on my porch. just a black, I was telling Ryan about this, because I'll sit out there and just look up at the sky, and just a black object across the sky, not a plane, nothing else, not a drone. And I actually took a little video of it, but anyway, yeah, not to go on, but I have had a few sightings.
No, thanks for that. And I think there's people who get in touch with me who have loved the topic for decades and decades and still have never seen anything, and they pray for a sighting. And then there's other folks who are either are new, you'll know that well, Ryan, who are new, and they just see something, or they've seen multiple things and that gets them into it. So it can be pretty reaffirming for, I think, for folks that are affirming in the first place. So that's good to hear you've had those. And Ryan, of course, let's talk about before we get to the book. We touched on your father, Robert Wood, last time we spoke, and obviously, sadly, passed away late August, didn't he?
Yeah, that's true. Before I go down there, I guess I want to say a shout out to Anthony. I mean, he reached out to me, and what I respect and want more of in ufology is people that are interested in the history and are credible and have a good scientific and thoughtful background. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to collaborate with him and work on this book. And my dad did get a chance to see, I think, an early draft of it. And fundamentally, I think I may have mentioned last time that ufology has three major problems: credibility, leadership, and money. And this was my focus on credibility, to try to assemble a work of books, or work of quotations. But anyway, my father, started his ufological journey in sort of the mid 60s or so, as he was tasked by his management to work on anti-gravity research at McDonnell Douglas Astronautics Corporation, or Douglas Aircraft. And so that was interesting because he employed Stan Friedman and so forth at the time. But sadly, after 96 years, he wanted to live to 114. And we all didn't have the heart to tell him that wasn't going to happen. He passed away last August, late August, at 96, relatively peacefully. Within a few days, I was at the hospital, so that was a little stressful. But, if we all can die in a few days rather than some long, drawn-out saga, boy, everybody be happy. But he left a long legacy of work at the Mutual UFO Network and at NICAP and AIAA, American Institute of Astronautics and Aeronautics, and Douglas Aircraft Company and McDonnell Douglas and Boeing, where he spent 43 years. And then maybe most importantly in his legacy was, the authentication of the Majestic documents that I worked with him on. And we really pushed hard on that starting in 1994 through, the end of the crash retrieval conferences in 2009. And then he focused on a variety of books selected by extraterrestrials by another fellow Douglas employee, Bill Tompkins. So he was the president of the Rotary Club and the Toastmasters, and focused on the church. When you read the biography and attended the memorial service, and I had to give a speech and so forth, and reviewed his life, I go, wow, really did a lot. It was humbling, because then you start thinking about your own morality and not morality, mortality, and decide, well, maybe I should start writing down what I've accomplished and what I want for my memorial service. But anyway, that's sort of the and there's a big article in the Mutual UFO Journal, a recent journal that came out, that has more details.
No, thank you for that. And I think he probably crammed in 114 years worth of work into those 96 years. So I think in a way he got that. So cheers for catching us up on that, Ryan. And thoughts obviously with you and the family. But celebrating his legacy and moving on, you've mentioned both of you the book UFOs, Who Knows? And I want to ask first off, you maybe mentioned Anthony there. You had reached out to Ryan a couple of years ago. Is that where the initial seeds of the book had come from?
Yeah,
Well,
but Ryan had a version that he had started already and was working on from years ago. So it was cool because he had a lot of early stuff, and then I kind of brought in a lot of newer stuff.
yeah, that was great. We actually, because we're of different age generations, uh, and that was very complimentary. Is I mean, Anthony did a lot of work on celebrities, a lot of work on religious people, and then cleaned up a lot of the transitions between the various chapters. And you know, it was a complimentary, collaborative effort to make a much stronger book.
Do you know, I think a lot of folks in the UFO topic can be very precious or protective of the subject. Anthony, being newer to it in the last couple of years, you've probably noticed that. But I think when you've got the sections you have astronauts, military, you know, celebrities, some folks may roll their eye at the celebrity aspect of it and not want to hear from Demi Lovato or Miley Cyrus or whoever it may be. But celebrities now have audiences at their fingertips of tens or hundreds of millions of fans, don't they? And when you include those names and those thoughts, people flock to that, don't they?
Yeah, that was kind of our rationale when we talked about it, about the importance of the celebrities. And exactly as you said, you know, people might go, but like you said, they have such a big reach globally. And if more celebrities would talk about it, I think that would make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, and we wanted to include more modern celebrities, and this is sort of the opening, book. We welcome more quotations from other people, and we're starting to solicit more quotations. The criteria really is, how famous you are, how good your quote is, and how accomplished you are. So I want a quote from Taylor Swift. Uh, and let's get all the Swifties thinking about UFOs. That would be just killer. And just as a sidebar, uh, you sent me this note that November 13th, we're going to have these congressional hearings coming up. And one of the people that's on the panel is Michael Schellenberger. And I gave a long interview about the Majestic documents to him about 2 months, and I sent him a copy of the book, UFOs, Who Knows? And so I'm hoping that when he testifies, he's going to pull it out and wave it around, and sales are going to go through the roof.
There would be no better advertising, would there, than that? And we're going to circle back round to the hearings as well. So let's talk about putting that book together. So whichever one of you may be best, you've got celebrities. It kicks off with astronauts as well. I particularly like that as a subset to talk about because as a theme, there doesn't seem to be any better group of people placed to talk about UFOs than the few humans we are literally blasting into space. I mean, we're presuming they go up there and see all kinds of stuff, but when you're looking through the quotes, when you're doing the research, do you think, and this is maybe still more speculative, that's the reality that once you're up there, you're seeing all this stuff flying about, or is it maybe more selective?
Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, well, we did give a lot of thought to the sequence of the sections. And so we started with astronauts because, again, we're hoping that the book would go to a very general audience as well as people that are really into the subject, because there's a lot of people that this may be brand new to. So we thought that starting with astronauts, people probably generally associate spaceships and UFOs with space travel. So and seeing at what these astronauts have all said, it was pretty eye-opening. A lot of things I never encountered before. And so leading with that, with these highly credible people in knowing aerodynamics and having been out in space and in the upper atmosphere, to lead it with what they said we thought would set a very good tone, and then transition into celebrities, take it a little more easier, then progress through the book, go to science, and go to military in the middle, because we found that the military quotes tend to be the ones that are perhaps the most shocking claims and quotes. And then moving on to the rest, the religious, for people that, want to get that perspective, and so on.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we have, Gordon Cooper, Edgar Mitchell, and Buzz Aldrin, James Irwin, Eugene Surin, Story Musgrave, Deke Slayton, Al Warden, and a couple of Russian ones. The ones that are the most stunning are, Edgar Mitchell's comments. Yes, there have been ET visitations. There have been crashed craft. There have been materials and bodies recovered, and it goes on for another 3 or 4 sentences.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very prescient and powerful. And then there are other ones that are, I think Buzz Aldrin said, "Yeah, I saw something. It wasn't a star. It was, and it clearly was something out there." So each celebrity or each quotation is varies in power and impact depending upon who you respect and who you admire. And that was part of the charm of doing the book, is that it allowed you to go to your clan, go to your key people, and see what they said.
The James Irwin quote stood out for me. Obviously, he talks about seeing beings or aliens on the surface of the moon. It says a famous Canadian pilot, and largely a theme that comes through the astronauts specifically is they are discouraged from talking about this. I've often joked on the podcast, and Anthony, you'll appreciate this, maybe you'd say, being of younger generation, when we start sending folks into space on a commercial basis, you talk about Kanye West going up on a SpaceX mission. When you've got a Kanye West and, orbiting the Earth with his iPhone, other phones are available, of course, but are we going to then have this catastrophic disclosure where you've got Kanye, Jay-Z, I'm just naming rappers now, Eminem, all filming strange things in space where we don't get that from astronauts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I wonder whatever might be going on the moon. I wonder how much of it might be underground and not really visible.
Why?
I don't know, because of like plans in 1958 to build a base on the moon, the Project Horizon, and I don't know, thinking of maybe that something like that might have happened.
You certainly need some exotic technology to go underground and on the moon and so forth. I think it's the backside of the moon that's that's where the aliens control everything, and there may be some joint activity with humans or certain humans. And this is the evidence of Ingo Swann and some other books and witnesses.
And Chaim Eshed, who's in the book, the 30-year space chief of the Israeli Space Directorate, claimed that there's bases on the moon that are being worked with allegedly humans and non-human intelligence.
That's one of the certainly more out there quotes, and I think you mentioned before, Ryan, there are a lot of grounded quotes in there, maybe from the military and from some of the astronauts. Some of it is just more opinion based on, mathematics, that we are not alone, we've got to be being visited. But then I think a lot of folks maybe know the Chaim Eshed quotes that we're part of galactic federations and we are this burgeoning new species. I'll ask you both personally, where does that sort of quote sit with you in terms of sharing that with your ordinary members of the public who maybe aren't necessarily as up to speed on the UFO conversation? Because that's pretty extreme on the scale, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say it is. But I also bring you back to an earlier quote from General MacArthur, who says the politics of the future are going to be cosmic and interplanetary. He said this in 1955. And so he was pretty out there. But I'll turn it over to Anthony because I think he got the original Hebrew translation and studied that quite a bit.
Yeah, Andy, I totally understand that, right? And that can be extreme, but I try to just treat things objectively. This individual served at a certain role for a
Yeah.
long time. He was highly decorated. He worked on a lot of classified programs. We know that Israel is a close ally of the United States and has a very advanced military and intelligence network. So for me, it's just an enigma. Why would this guy come out and say this? It's very puzzling, and nobody has heard from him at all since 2020, when he basically wrote this book and gave one interview, and he hasn't made any public statements since. So for me, I just treat it as that. It's a statement from this person, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. 40 years ago, he might have died mysteriously of a suicide or a cancer or something else. Both Oppenheimer and Einstein both died of, quote, cancer. And even J. Edgar Hoover, who knew tons of stuff, had a heart attack, but he sort of had heart conditions. And so isn't that the perfect marriage of a murder? But I'm just speculating.
Yeah.
But there's others that are more obvious, like, Forrestal, who goes out a window as the first secretary.
And Andy, I just trying to throw in one more thing.
Please, yeah.
Also, Carl Nell, I found it significant that when Carl Nell was interviewed, and he's only made a couple public statements, he did mention Haim Eshed. So to me, it's pretty interesting that he would throw that name out there, even knowing it's attached to those kind of out there claims.
No, absolutely. And I think that's something that as you're going through the book, you're getting a lot of snapshots of stuff here. You're not having to read pages and pages. For me, I've got a very poor attention span, but I think probably anyone, well, a lot of folks modern day, especially youngsters, not to be ageist, but I've got kids, so I know what they're like. They want things short, snappy, TikTok length, quick, one pager, bang, it's done. And this book is great for those kind of folks who just want to read a couple of pages at a time, or you can hand it to someone on the spot if you've got visitors around your house, you're hosting, New Year's parties coming up, all that kind of stuff. Thanksgiving in the US is a big one. And you can hand this to someone who maybe gets involved in the UFO conversation. It's a bit more difficult to hand them Ross Coulter in plain sight and say, read a few chapters on the spot, right? Or, I've got Ryan, your book there, Magic Eyes Only.
Oh,
Pick a few chapters to read. That's one of a take that away and give me it back in a couple of weeks, okay? This book, you can hand them and say, look, pick a page, any couple of pages, and you'll get some information, stuff they're probably not going to know. Was there any particular patterns, themes, or threads as you were both kind of researching? Ryan, I'll come to you first, as you're a more storied researcher with decades under your belt. As you were putting this together, that even you started to notice or see?
Well, I started this, long ago, like 08 or 09. And, the patterns were that there was a lot of military and a lot of scientists and a lot of engineers saying pretty profound stuff. And so I didn't, suss out any particular patterns other than, I was clearly aware that there's crashed UFOs, and I've been, way past that. I think Anthony's comment about Nell and Ashad is interesting, because I didn't make that connection. And so then you ask your question, well, if there is a galactic federation that's sort of controlling things, what's their objectives? What's their agenda? What do they want to see from humanity? And that's worthy of some good chin stroking.
Before I come to you, Anthony, and ask you the question, Ryan, on that note then, Anthony's, like you've mentioned, of a younger generation. Anthony's newer to the topic, last couple of years, is coming in fresh, maybe less biased than a lot of us maybe have. What did you learn from Anthony, as an experienced researcher?
Um, well, just he pulled a lot of the religious people together and the celebrities together and added a touch of higher class um, transitions between the various chapters. You know, when you get more people involved, it helps a lot to clean up, you know, your myopic thinking at times. And so that was really the key value add that Anthony brought. But I think, you know, I've been feeding him stuff on Antarctica and his research on Antarctica and the Germans and so forth. I think that's a path that he's exploring and investigating. I'm not going to do that, but he is. And I'm just going to help him to keep sending him stuff that I find. And just for a quick plug, my tool, ufodex.com, has now 488,000 pages in it. It's an AI tool that you can ask any question you want right there, and it takes about a day to get a response. But you can access the knowledge base of ufology and get a thoughtful AI answer. So
just making a note, Ryan, ufodex.com. I'll put that link in the description for folks because I'm really bad at saying I'm going to do that and then I forget and don't put it in the description and then people shout at me afterwards. So I've made a note to put that in there. And Anthony, that question about themes and rabbit holes for you as you've been researching this, Ryan mentions Antarctica, and that's one I always mention I'm really intrigued and interested in the UFO topic, and I've yet to do an actual show on it. So that might be one to get you on just to discuss on your own at some point.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
What about what you've actually learned then in the meantime? Is that something that you've picked out from these quotes? And as you're going through it and seeing military scientists, religious folks, celebrities, astronauts, and you're seeing all these different quotes, all this research that Ryan's put together and what you're starting to see, are there any themes or threads that you begin to pull at that really maybe inspire you to go down those roads of research?
Yeah, so not necessarily anything from this project that got me into the Antarctica, but I would say that the threads, for sure, you see them. And that was one of the cool things of really committing to this project and just pulling all these quotes, putting all the sections. And each section, each chapter has a sort of, you see a theme in each one, you know, because they're different groups of people. And so overall, I would say, you know, people have been seeing and encountering these you know, anomalous phenomena for many decades, as we all know. The government's covering up what they know about it. This is beyond questionable, you know, going all the way back to the 40s. And there's information that, and you know, the government's been trying, some parts of the government have been trying to get this information out. So I think that's the bigger arc, but each section kind of took on its own themes. Like, for example, I found the president section really interesting to do because I did it in like all in one kind of sitting almost. And so to see from 1947 till now what they've all said, there's a lot of similar themes. Like they asked for information and they were told that they couldn't get it. Some of them even had direct experiences. And, you know, each section I would say has a theme.
Where do you sit with that then, Anthony? Because I suppose that's very relevant right now, talking about presidents and what they do and don't know. For anyone living under a rock, the US has just elected Donald Trump again for another presidency. He'll be taking over from Joe Biden in a few months. Now, I keep politics out the podcast, so that's not what I'm asking. However, President Trump, Donald Trump, whatever you want to call him, has had his 4 years originally. He done his famous interview with his son, and he was asked about Roswell. And I think Trump's been pretty consistent in saying he isn't a believer or not particularly something he believes in, but he has heard some very interesting things. I know he likes saying the word things quite a lot, but also that he trusts the pilots and the military folks that he's been speaking to. So on one hand, he's hearing really interesting stuff. On the other, he's still adamant. And even now, when he talks about UFOs or UAP, he seems to say, I don't particularly believe. So where does that sit with you in terms of why presidents would be briefed on anything at all when they're temporary? You know, they don't stick around for decades like some of these
Yeah.
high-ranking guys. And I'll come to you, Ryan, on that one first.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. Yeah, the president basically isn't briefed on everything, even if he asks for it. I mean, and even on some of the majestic documents themselves, it's stamped right on the front. Is that until there's a signed executive order from the president and approval of U.S. Majestic Security and Intelligence Command, can any information be released? So there's all these checks and balances, but the general approach is if the president asks for, tell me about what's going on with UFOs, their first response is, well, why, sir, do you want to know? And he says, well, I think they're a threat to our airspace. And the response will be, no, sir, we've analyzed that in detail, and they are not a threat to our airspace or to planet Earth. And generally, if he goes, well, I want to send me a report on that, so they write up a report and send it to him. But they do everything they can to minimize his exposure and improve his plausible deniability, because that's what we need. He wants plausible deniability. So when the press asks him, well, did you get a briefing on Roswell? No, I didn't. And Dick Cheney does that sort of thing in the book, where he basically said, if I did get a briefing on it, surely would have been classified. And so that's the sort of dynamic. And the intelligence people, and there's probably only a few that have the right doors or right security clearances to access the data. They may say, tell me about the Roswell event, and the lawyer says, well, gee, I'll check into that. He talks to the intelligence community, and then, well, I don't have anything for you other than what's in the National Archives. So it's a ring around the rosy, and it's not clear that you'll get a clear, honest, arresting briefing about bodies and aliens, etc.
Let me follow up then, Anthony, with you, and Ryan, if you want to come back in, you can. Does it make sense if you're going to be in a position that is largely one of, if not the most important on the planet, from a public point of view, you've got 4 or 8 years to do a job, and no matter when you take over, it's going to be difficult. You are going to be spinning so many plates, be fighting so many different opinions. The last thing you want is this massive major thing to also have to deal with. Now, I imagine up there with a nuclear war, the disclosure of alien life would probably be the biggest thing, because that is just so paradigm shifting for the planet. Is it something any sensible person would actually want to deal with, and you're better just having it be something you can ignore and bat away? I'll come at you first, Anthony, on that.
Yeah, I think that's a logical way to look at it, is what you said. It's probably, if you're in that position, such a difficult position for 4 years, you're probably better off to just kick the can down the road as far as you can and not deal with that. Now, again, being completely apolitical, all politics aside, we're strictly talking about the UFO subject. Trump has said some interesting things, and would he be the kind of person that would even maybe want to be that president? I don't know. Maybe. Would he like the attention? Would he like to be the one in office when that happens? Maybe. I do think, I was just thinking this the other day, I think it's an interesting correlation that when he was in office from 2016 to 2020, that's when the 2017 New York Times article came out, and this whole modern thing started rolling. The UAP task force happened, and then that went into legislation. So I think it's interesting. And I also think it's interesting with Biden, who was there the last 4 years, how and I don't know if I said this in the book, maybe, but you know, he was president during literally the most where this subject was, in the biggest public display or in government interest in our history, and he didn't say a word about it. So those are kind of interesting facts from my perspective. And you're right to think, would we just put it off? But maybe Trump maybe is the president that maybe wouldn't, and he has said interesting things hinting at that he would declassify things. But to go back to what Ryan said, I think it seems to certainly be the case that the president wouldn't be briefed on everything, and I don't think, I personally don't think any president would just be able to bust open the whole thing. Maybe like the beginning of it or something.
Yeah, I would add to that is that whoever starts this ball rolling and says something is ultimately going to pay a huge price, because the implications are unknown and maybe unknowable, and have dramatic impact on the world and societies, both monetarily, technologically, psychologically. Just to give you an example, so, well, yeah, we had a crash saucer in Roswell, and the press says, well, gee, can I see the hatch, the hieroglyphics, and the guts? No, you can't see that. Well, okay, we'll show it to you. So we show it to you. Well, were there any bodies in there? Well, yeah, there were. Can we see one? Can we take a DNA sample? Well, did you ever culture any biological or chemical weapons from that in the 50s when you guys were all into chemical and biological warfare? Well, we can't really talk about that. Well, but yeah, we did. And we destroyed it all. And so, well, did you guys figure out how gravity works? Well, yeah, but we can't tell you how that works because that's our super classified sacred technology. That's gone rogue outside the government, and that's a technology that would shatter geopolitical and energy and all this. It's the technology that's going to reshape the world, be it fusion in a roller bag, which is what I'm working on for my day job, or gravity control. So I think it's a huge can of worms. Xi Jinping might do it, but I don't know. I don't think Trump is going to do it.
No, right at the minute, and we'll get to the political stuff in a few minutes, gents, because obviously the hearings are coming up soon that you've both touched on. But just to finish up the last few parts on the book then, are there any particular groups or individuals that you would love to get a quote from for a part 2, and you can't say Taylor Swift?
Yeah. Well, within each category, there are more people that could be added. And it's sort of a delicate balance. The book's got 180 quotes in it, I think. And if we had 200 quotes, I think that'd be a good target. But some quotes are so-so, and some quotes are, oh my God, and so you want the oh my God from the super credible people. So it's a continual balance of trying to get new ones and move the old ones out, or make the book thicker, I suppose, is the right thing to do, is just make it bigger, and include everybody.
Give me a name, Ryan. Is there, or a position? Is there someone that you think, if I could get the editor of the New York Times or the chief science advisor for the the UN or something like that?
Yeah, well, Chris Mellon would be good to get a quote from. It'd be fun to try to get some more modern military people. There's a lot of astronauts. I think latest count, I don't remember, maybe Anthony knows, but there's been like 500 people that have been to space. and we only have 12 astronauts or 13 astronauts quoted, and getting a few more astronauts quoted would be very that would be something that would be useful and powerful. And then more celebrities, and then even upgrading the existing quotes. Ultimately, the book gives people like presidents or military others cover to say, well, look at all these other people that said fascinating things. Well, I can improve my quote. I'll give you a new one. And so and there's people we forgot too that need to be added.
Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the biggest needle mover with this project would be getting really big name stars, because I think that attracts public attention. So if we could get really big name stars to talk about the subject in a unemotional kind of straightforward factual way, or just share their opinion, I think that would make a big difference. When we did the celebrity section, there's actually not that many celebrities who've said something, although there are the collection that we gathered in this book, which is pretty much, I mean, we've probably missed a couple, but it's pretty much every celebrity that said something is in this book. And so I think if we got some really big names, I mean, that's something that could make a news page, and that's how we found all these. Keanu Reeves said something, Alicia Keys said something in an interview, and then it gets published in a few magazines, a few newspapers. So if we could get some really big name people, that would make a big difference for me. And maybe as Ryan was talking, I thought another avenue could be people like congressional staffers, people who have been witness to a lot of information that haven't necessarily spoke. I know the one person that's going to be in the James Fox documentary, I forget his name, but he was like a congressional staffer. And a lot of times, the way I understand it, these congressional staffers get a lot of these briefings and they see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. So that could be pretty interesting too.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few A-listers in the celebrities, but there are also of older generations, from David Bowie to John Lennon, and but then Miley Cyrus and as Demi Lovato and Sammy.
And some
Davis.
of them had sightings, like Nick Jonas is in there, and he said he saw flying saucers while he was playing basketball.
Yeah, or Halle Berry, Alicia Keys, and Byron Davis, and some sports guys.
Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah, Shaq was in there. So that's what we want to work on, is try to add more and get more bigger names, as Anthony said. That'd be the next phase for us, and do an update in a year or something like that, or 6 months. Make more press about it. But I'm hoping that Michael Schellenberger is going to hold this book up at the hearings and say, hey, look at all these people that have made stunning comments. Maybe you have them read a couple.
Right, let's get to that then, okay, gents, before we wrap up and let people know where they can get a hold of the book, obviously. Because as we record this, 20 minutes before I hit record, I sent you both over the list of names that just got released for the hearings that are due in Washington on November 13th, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. That's about 4:30 p.m. for those of us in the UK. They'll be on YouTube, folks. The easiest place to watch it is the live stream on YouTube. So the witness list, we knew retired Rear Admiral Timothy Gallaudet was going to be one of them. He was the only confirmed name, despite all the rumours. Confirmed now are Luis Elizondo is finally going to testify, which is something people have wanted to see now since he came out. Michael Gold is a name that won't be as familiar to a lot of folks, but his name is out there. He's noted as the Chief Growth Officer for Redwire Corporation, and interestingly, former NASA Associate Administrator. I believe he was also on the NASA Task Force panel as well. And like you mentioned, journalist Michael Schellenberger, who of course is the guy who broke the story about Immaculate Constellation, the special access program, just a few weeks ago. And I think it's those two last names, Michael Gold and Michael Schellenberger, who are really raising the eyebrows on the social media circuit as the small chance I've had to look. So, Ryan, come to you first. Your thoughts on those names?
Yeah, well, I mean, Gillette is in the book as a quote, but maybe we'll get a better quote from him at this hearing. We'll have to update it. I don't, and I've heard Elizondo and his imminent book is good. I don't know anything about Gold. It'd be interesting to see what he says. He's not in the book, so we're probably going to get a couple of good quotes from him from those hearings. And then, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Andy, Schellenberger, spent 3 hours with me on the phone, probably, and multiple follow-up emails, interviewing me about the Majestic documents, and I gave him the full treatment and focused in on the Special Operations Manual as being the most authentic and why. And I pinged him a couple times saying, well, are you going to do anything with this or put it out? And he never really gave me a straight answer, but maybe he's prepared to, well, here's the 30-page report that I want to put into the congressional record, as he's being interviewed before the committee. And I just wonder whether or not, with the last one in Grush volunteered to brief all these people in a skiff and provide details. Did that ever happen? Hopefully we'll get some clarity about, did that happen, and what did the people learn, or did they even have the clearances to know or learn? So that's my sort of comment about that. I'm be eager to watch and see what's going on.
Anthony?
Yeah, I would say I'm surprised that they released a public list. There were the comments from Representative Tim Burchett, who said that after the names came out, organizations, including NASA, supposedly scared witnesses away from the last hearing.
I'm with you on that. Yep.
Yeah, I'm surprised they released a list. The Michael Gold is interesting. I'm happy. I'm glad that we're going to hear from somebody new. The Michael Schellenberger is very interesting to me, and I'm hearing that from you now the first time. Now, on the surface, that's kind of like a head scratcher, but when I think about it, that's probably good, because he is the one who, right after Grush came out, said he spoke with a number of these witnesses of Grush's, and he came out with that first article. Then he came out with this last article with the Immaculate Conception. So according to what he's put out there publicly, he has spoken to these witnesses directly. So if they ask him the right questions, that could be significant. I think we're all hoping for firsthand witnesses.
Yep.
At this hearing, and if there were, I would hope they wouldn't release those public names, because obviously, as Grush has said and many others, there's retaliation, there's reprisals. Witnesses were scared away. So I'm hoping they didn't mention those top secret witnesses or unnamed witnesses. But if this is all we get, it's interesting. We could move forward. I think it all depends on the questions that are asked. And I'm kind of hopeful for that, because Nancy Mace, of all of the people, I thought she probably asked the best questions. She didn't beat around the bush in the July 23 hearing. She got right to the point. Where are the bodies? Can you tell me exactly where they are? And then, Grush said yes. So we should be moving forward from there, in my opinion. Something's slowing this all down.
And I agree. I think that there are going to be some surprise witnesses too.
You think so?
Yeah. I don't know who it's going to be, but I think you need to do that to add more zest and flavor and excitement and buzz to the whole hearing and process, and make news. So they want that.
I don't know how these things normally work, and clearly not a US citizen. Is there a chance that Michael Schellenberger is literally saving someone's seat for them?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
It's possible.
On the day, stands up and says, just thank you, but I'm going to bring in, it starts to sound Hollywood movie-ish, last minute surprise. Just before we finish up, Your Honor, I'd like to bring in my final witness to the stand, and no one expects it and everyone gasps. I think some folks online are putting 2 and 2 together, trying to get 4, and thinking that Michael Gold may be one of the sources who gave information about Immaculate Constellation. Just looking at the NASA side of things, some of his work, so maybe he's one of those people, and Schellenberger's there to talk about he did mention multiple sources. I know Jeremy Corbell mentioned there were multiple sources as well. So maybe Schellenberger's there representing them. Who knows? We've got a couple of days left of speculation on that, but at least we have a list of names. And I'll just ask you very quickly, gents. Anthony, starting with you, what do you think the best case scenario coming from this hearing could be? And I'll add realistically.
I think realistically, if you get these people to state, in the affirmative that these programs exist, that they participated on them, or they directly know people that participated on them, and that, the process after this is really getting these names and cooperative witnesses to a congressional investigative committee. In a nutshell, I think the best outcome is that a congressional investigative official committee gets formed after this, gets signed into law, and they really investigate this. And in a year plus, whatever long, of multiple hearings happens, and we gradually get the information to come out. In my opinion, at this moment, that's probably what I'm thinking is the best outcome.
Ryan?
Yeah, I agree. It's a great outcome. I mean, when you first asked the question, I thought the best answer is to have another hearing and to have maybe another investigation or more details. The real thing is to start taking depositions and hauling people before, these inquisitions to sort of dig in and finally find the truth. And it's pretty easy for, you would think, like the Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, the cause lawsuit of 20 years ago. The unredacted version of that lawsuit should be viewable to the congressman, which should tell a heck of a lot about the nature of the phenomenon and the evidence and so forth. Or reading the unredacted version of James Forrestal's FBI file, or there's many FBI files that I have that are just fully redact the hell out. That if you will look at the unredacted versions, they could start to paint a big story. And then the work by, I think others around improving the law to allow better authority and better leverage into getting evidence from various agencies would be very helpful as well. So I think a few people in Congress have their teeth into this now, and it's going to be either long and slow, multi-year, drag it out, which I think is the most likely answer. But it could go quick, and so it's just my speculation on the situation.
Well, listen, we'll wrap up there, gents. And folks, I would encourage you to pick up a copy of the book UFOs, Who Knows? It's on Amazon right now in the UK for $14.99. And with Christmas around the corner, I would recommend something like this, folks, for a Secret Santa gift, because I know offices around the UK, people are looking for something that isn't too expensive to give to a colleague, something a little bit different. And you know what? The amount of people who get in touch with me and ask, what would you recommend to someone? What would you want to get them or give them? Something they're going to read and pass around. You can't go wrong with UFOs, Who Knows, to pass around this Christmas and get people talking about the UFO topic as well, folks. And you know what? While you're at it, pick up a copy for yourself. It can't do any harm. So, gents, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining us. And folks, I'm sure they'll appreciate if you leave a review of the book once you've picked up a copy as well. That always helps on the Amazon algorithm. Anything I've missed off there for you?
Thanks, Andy. You did a great job. I enjoyed it. And I think we got our message through to your audience.
Yeah, Andy, thanks a lot for having us. This was a really enjoyable discussion that we had here.